It's alright. There's a good amount here that I'm able to appreciate, but ultimately the bulk of it ends up being generic and uninspired. The story is fairly simple. A childish semi-amnesiac girl is out on a mission to find her dead dad's remains, and two saboteur siblings follow her on her journey while they're being chased down by a military group. There's a couple of extra elements added in the second half, but they generally end up being left as setup rather than leading anywhere, probably to be expanded on in the second season. While there is the occasional exposition dump, what I really appreciate about this story is how natural the flow of information generally is. Not a lot of information is given up simply for the audience's sake. Characters generally don't inquire about things that they already know about, which leaves the responsibility of figuring things out to the viewer, although for the most part this is fairly standard stuff, so you shouldn't ever end up lost. Characters also tend to actually act out their roles in the universe. For instance, the motivations of Chaika aren't ever called into question until the second to last episode, and even that ends up being by a third party. Toru and Akai, true to their nature as saboteurs, simply set out to accomplish their goal. They do what they're paid to do, nothing more, nothing less. This naturally requires the viewer to be comfortable with ambiguity. I personally found it compelling, but some might end up being confused or frustrated. The characters leave a lot to be desired. I kinda got the impression that they stacked all their chips into making Chaika a moe waifu character, which is easily evidenced by the sheer amount of detail in her design compared to everyone else, and this leaves the rest of the characters with the short end of the stick. Toru has a bit of backstory attributed to him in episode 9, but it amounts to nothing substantial and is fairly generic. Akai is a Brocon comedic relief character. Some of her jokes land, some of them don't, she's pretty hit or miss and doesn't contribute much at any given moment. Chaika is technically an addition to the main cast from episode 4 onwards, but she shows up so rarely and purely as a means to advance the plot that it's easy to forget she's even there. Then there's the titular character Chaika. She's not the smartest cookie. By design, we never learn much about her, but instead of developing the mystery around her, she merely serves to be cute or to cause conflict. While there are moments when she's actually useful and demonstrates that she's able to hold her own, these become fewer and farther between as the show goes on, which I thought was unfortunate. Due to the way the story is presented, the main cast doesn't end up being that fleshed out, which wouldn't be too much of an issue if they didn't shoehorn in a potential romance between Chaika and Toru. Even early on, he calls her a precious person, but this doesn't feel earned because they hadn't had a lot of interaction up to that point. It just feels like something they felt had to be included. The pursuers and general antagonists are generic and uninspired. The pursuing group could have been a decent opposite to Chaika's group, but the screen time that they have doesn't demonstrate any higher level of camaraderie or chemistry. They are constant in the show, but never have enough focus to cause me to care, despite the show's attempts. The blatant antagonists are your run-of-the-mill comically evil characters, uninteresting, boring, underwhelming. They could have easily done more of them, especially given that they're all people of high status, but they all end up being simply run-of-the-mill. In terms of presentation, Studio Bones is a safe bet when it comes to action animation, and they definitely deliver here. Unlike shows like Soul Eater, there's a lot more emphasis on tactics than flashy techniques, and so you end up with some relatively interesting fight scenes. Movements have sufficient follow-through and feel fluid, no complaints here. The art style is alright. Chaika obviously has the most attention to detail attributed to her, while Toru and the rest of them end up with fairly subdued designs. I think this actually works in the show's favor, since Chaika is clearly someone of greater mystic importance while the rest are almost entirely part of some kind of mercenary unit. It's just a little funny to see the absolute difference between them all. The sound design, on the other hand, is extremely obnoxious. The OST ranges from generic to extremely distracting and will often overwhelm the scene. Absolutely terrible audio mixing. The soundtrack also tends to not actually fit what's being shown on screen. There's scenes where Toru is sneaking around or having a conversation with Chaika, and they'll play this really loud, chaotic music. Then there are action sequences during the climax of the episode where they'll play this really subdued, quiet music. And it really kills your immersion. It takes me out the experience. And a lot of the time, the ideas that it has do end up working decently. However, it's also played with mismatched or underwhelming execution, which ultimately leaves the viewer whelmed by what they're watching. I felt entertained throughout the entire ride, so it's certainly not a bad show, but in the end, it only ever managed to do enough, and left a good amount to be desired.